Hey Exiles, Chronic Painless here with the Week 1 update for my Blade Vortex League Starter build guide in patch 3.27. In this video, I want to really dive deeper into the Foulborn Berek's Respite tech that I've been using to make my explosions feel better than they have felt since Ritual League, and the good news is you can even get this going on a relatively low budget and also keep scaling it and even make it a little bit tanky. First though, I will go over the mechanics of what's actually happening with these explosions, why they're so much better than other explosions, and then talk about the various budget levels and the crucial factors to get them going. Now I know I briefly went over how this works in my last video, but there's been enough questions since that I felt like I should really break it down. And so what Berek's Respite Foulborn mods are doing is, of course, causing monsters to explode, but with a chain limiting factor. Each of them has this cannot inflict ignite, cannot shock. That is stopping the chain right in its tracks because the monster will explode, deal fire damage, but that fire damage won't ignite, and so that target won't explode for any more fire damage. Same is true of the lightning damage, failing to shock, and therefore any enemies it hits will not explode with more lightning damage. And so just having one or the other, or even both of these mods, would enhance your clear speed in the sense that smaller mobs would blow up and deal lots of damage to bigger mobs, but you wouldn't get any real chaining out of this effect because at most you're going to kill the next monster in line, but that monster won't explode since they won't have met any of the conditions for that explosion. Because tooltips that say cannot will override things that say always or 100% chance. It doesn't matter. Cannot and never are impossible to overcome. What we can do, though, is work around them. And if we add a Shaper of Storms Ascendancy into the mix, we will start to see a mini chain happening, because what will happen is that the first mob, if it's ignited and shocked, will explode. It will deal a bunch of fire damage that can't ignite and lightning damage that can't shock. However, with the Shaper of Storms, the fire damage will shock, and therefore the next target will explode when it dies, but it will only deal more lightning damage, and that lightning damage can't shock, and therefore the chain will end on the third target. So we get the explosion. The second target meets one of the conditions to explode, but not the other. And so when that explosion happens, it runs into the chain stopper mod and the chain ends. But when we add Shaper of Flames on top of this, that's when things get crazy, because the first target will be ignited and shocked, explode, and the second target will take a bunch of fire damage, which will shock, and a bunch of lightning damage, which will ignite. So even though our fire damage can't ignite and our lightning damage can't shock when we're using these explosions, it doesn't say anything about whether our fire damage can shock or whether our lightning damage can ignite, and therefore our ascendancies are able to take effect, and the second target will actually get both shocked and ignited. So when they explode, they will deal a whole bunch of fire and lightning damage to the third target. That fire and lightning damage will shock and ignite respectively on that third target. That third target explodes, and so on and so forth. And this is what makes this just so much more powerful than using one or both of these mods, or one in combination with the Shaper of Storms. You need all of these things together in order to get the truly infinite chaining. And what makes this so much better than other sources of explode and even other workarounds to cannot inflict shock explode, like in the impulses, you could get various shock proliferations. The baseline radius of proliferation is nothing near the baseline radius of an explosion, and so scaling the effects of this to be much more reliable in terms of having larger areas to get your chains started, it is going to be so much better using this as opposed to just an impulses with, say, an Esh's Mirror or some sort of Eldritch Implicit on gloves. And what makes this better than a Crusade mod or an Obliteration, for example, is that it is guaranteed. The lack of the probabilistic element here enables it to chain on single file targets, around corners. It really has to be experienced to understand just how much more potential these chains have when each explosion is guaranteed by the last. If you have any kind of probabilistic element in play, eventually you're going to get a couple bad rolls on the edge of a pack, and the next pack in line is not going to take enough damage, and the chain will break. But with the Bereks and the double shaper combo, once you start exploding, you will never stop. And so even though we will have a slightly harder time scaling the damage from these lightning and fire explosions as we would if we were just doing a physical explosion and scaling it the same way as our blade Vortex, it's easy enough to just pick up generic damage and elemental damage that you barely lose any single target, and the explosions themselves will be dealing triple the damage of a Crusader mod because they're happening 3 times as often. So not only do they have the guaranteed chaining factor, they also enhance local clear speed in the sense that explosions of white mobs will take down rare monsters fairly easily. So now that we've got the mechanics of it covered, let's talk about how you actually get it going. And fortunately, you do not need to break the bank going for a Berek's Respite that has both of these mods on it. These were somewhat affordable a couple days ago, but have been skyrocketing ever since. And though that's certainly going to be the target eventually in order to get the maximum efficiency out of our gear slots, there are ways that you can still get to this infinite chaining without needing both mods on a single ring. The simplest, of course, would be to get 2 Berek's Respite rings, one with the Shock Explode, one with the Ignite Explode, and wear one on each hand, and then you will have the same effect. All you're giving up is the Curse on Hit potential from your Mark of Submission, and you can replace that by getting Hrim Sorrows with Elemental Weakness. And though this will reduce the effect of the Elemental Weakness itself, since it will be a lower level curse, it will still substantially increase the effectiveness of the explosions, as it will lower the enemy's resistances on hit, and these explosions are of course hits. You can also combine the Ignite Explosion mod with an Impulse's Broken Heart chest piece, and this mod with the Shock Explode has the exact same text as the Berek's Ring, and so although you'll lose the opportunity to get a big amount of AoE and area damage from the Carcass Jack, having this infinite explosion is certainly worth it. And so an Ignite Ring and Impulses, or an Ignite Ring and a separate Shock Ring, are the budget ways of getting this build going. Just make sure that you're still trying to get that elemental weakness on hit. Make sure that you're doing the other things I talked about in my last video, changing that cold damage, changing that physical damage out for more generic damage, for more elemental damage. This can happen easily with the clusters. A lot of this is going to be happening in the passive tree. Change your Fizz clusters to elemental clusters. Drop some of the cold nodes in favor of just generic damage nodes. You can even go for this fire mastery, which will give you huge amount of just increased hit damage, generic damage, and that will be applied to all ignited targets. And naturally, we're going to be igniting everybody with Shaper of Flames. This mastery is a really nice way to get a bunch of damage very efficiently. There are lots of other little adjustments we can make in order to really maximize the value of these explosions while giving up as little as possible. For starters, a Cinder Swallow Urn Flask is a tremendous option here. Of course, everything is going to be ignited, and so everything will be getting this increased damage taken. If you get one with Malediction, that'll increase the damage taken even further. And so you're going to be getting a lot of value from this Cinder Swallow Flask in terms of the lightning and fire explosions from the Foulborn Bereks. Itziri's Flask is also tremendous value, giving us all of that elemental damage that we're doing as some extra chaos. And unfortunately, this wouldn't be enough to overcome the explosion chain blocking. It's not just the lightning damage that can't shock, it's any damage coming from that particular explosion, whether it's the original fire or a little bit of chaos gained on top. The whole explosion will be limited. And so it's the fact that this is two separate explosions happening simultaneously that lets us overcome the chain block. You can get some more chaos damage on these explosions from a chosen prefix or the comparable crafted prefix on a weapon. This is very nice value. Another small way you can optimize your explosions is to move out of Breath of Rime in favor of Winter's Embrace. This will give you the same freeze duration that you're looking for, but it will also give you some nice generic damage bonus as opposed to just the cold damage bonus. And naturally, since we still are doing plenty of cold damage with our BV, it's still freezing things. Having shattered something recently is almost always going to be the case. And so definitely worth making this little adjustment in order to get just a bit more from those explosions. You also want to try to avoid things that are applying particularly to spells. I got rid of the spell AoE leading into the caster mastery on the tree. As soon as I got the Awakened Unleash, didn't need the caster mastery anymore, and so it wasn't worth just increasing my BV's AoE when it is the explosions that are going to be doing most of the clearing. I also got a medium cluster that had the Overshock notable on it. This is going to give a lot of shock effect, boost that lightning damage from the explosions a little bit, and even justifies taking the lightning mastery a little bit over on the tree, because that is going to give us maximum 65% shocks. And with all of this ailment effect, with the baseline shock from the Shaper of Storms being so high, we're going to reach that very easily. And that's going to apply, of course, on all of these explosion hits. And overall, you will see tremendous results from even a low budget version, as long as you are getting both Explode mods and the Shaper of Storms and the Shaper of Flames. The goal then, of course, would be to farm your way to a double mod ring, but if those keep going up in price, it's probably going to be worth saving for a fancy belt first. And if you've already done that, then perhaps you're ready to move on to the higher level of investment, which would be a block version of this loadout. This week I tested a sort of rushed block loadout, by which I mean I got the essential components for the maximized block chance all together, but without any of the DPS boosting things that I had last league, such as the 8-link helm or the ability to run the Petrified Blood and Pain attunement setup. Those sorts of things I did not have the budget for yet, but with just the Svalin, a Red Nightmare, a replica Reckless Defense, a few passive points, and of course, as the Mountain Anoint, I was able to get back to that 89% effective block chance with the lucky block from Svalin, and sure enough, I felt quite a bit tankier. Now, of course, the explosions were less clean, the single target damage was lower, but I was able to at least level from 96 to 97, running T16.5 8-mod Jungle Valleys with Crop Rotation Harvest. That being said, I think I liked the glass cannon version of this a little better. I'm sure the block version will feel incredible once I get a little more damage to layer on top of it, especially if I can get a fancy belt going, which is going to be my next target. And so while the block loadout is absolutely viable if what you're looking for is to be extra tanky as soon as possible, I personally recommend putting it off until at least the post-headhunter phase of the build. But if you do want to get it going, just get those few essential pieces in place and rearrange your tree as shown in the POB linked in the description, and you will be blocking virtually everything. And I think that just about sums it up. That's all I've got for this video. You got 3 different budget levels of explodiness, with the entry level, the mid-range glass cannon, and then the higher budget block version. I'll be working towards even higher budget versions, of course, as the league progresses. And one thing to note about these POBs is that they're all direct exports from my character using actual gear that I was able to buy and equip. Nothing is theoretical or adjusted about them. And so there will be a few suboptimal or maybe even nonsensical things like having increased global critical strike multiplier with one-handed melee weapons on one of the jewels. That mod's not doing anything, so don't worry about that. Little things like that are going to be in these POBs because they're real. These are not theoretical POBs. All of the footage was recorded with virtually identical loadouts to what you're going to see in these POBs. So just keep that in mind as you're poring over some of the finer details, that not everything is perfectly polished just yet. But refining those things is what PoE is all about. So I'm going to get back to it. I'll be back with some more updates and more POBs later in the league. So stay tuned, or don't. I'm not your boss. And in the meantime, try to stay painless.